What if all the pieces of you thought were broken were never broken at all, just bruised from carrying too much silence? Too many goodbyes, too much pretending. What if your anger wasn't a flaw, but a wound that never had the space to speak? What if the version of you that survived was the strongest one you've ever known, and all this time you've been mistaking your scars for evidence of failure when they were really the proof that you kept going, even when no one clapped for you? There are stories we carry without words, wounds that have learned to walk, and hearts that speak in silence. Yours was all 3U. Never told anyone what it felt like to sit in a room full of people and still feel like a ghost they saw your smile. But never your shaking hands. There was a time when even you forgot what your own voice sounded like because every time you tried to speak, someone louder filled the air, someone bolder, colder, or just too distracted to notice, so you shrunk quietly, safely into a version of yourself that didn't ask for much, didn't need much, didn't take up too much space, but also never felt fully real. You'd became an echo of expectations, a living apology for taking up breath, but you were never broken. Just hurt in places no one knew how to touch it. Started early, a slammed door, a sharp word, a forgotten pickup from school. Moments that didn't seem like much, until they stacked themselves into a wall. No one saw it happen, but one day you woke up and realized you were always bracing for something, always flinching internally, even when things seemed fine. And that's the hard part. Things often looked fine: photos full of smiles, birthdays with candles, grades that made teachers proud, but behind every moment was a child holding their breath, hoping to be enough, fearing they never would be you. Didn't cry out loud, you cried in math class when the numbers wouldn't make sense in gym. When your body refused to move the right way in your room where no one ever knocked. But none of that was brokenness. It was hurt, soft, slow, constant, and somehow still invisibly. You learned early that being okay was safer than being honest. So you told people what they wanted to hear, that you were good, that it didn't bother you, that you understood, and maybe part of you really did, but the rest of you, the part that curled into tight fists under the blanket, that counted every heartbeat in the dark, that kept replaying the same memory over and over, that part never got to speak until now. In the quiet of this moment, with no one watching, you can begin to listen, not to the world, but to yourself. There's something gentle in your chest, something that's still here, still alive, still trying it. Remembers who you were before the silence, before the fear, before the self-doubt crept in like fog on a window, smearing the reflection until you couldn't see your own eyes clearly anymore. And that's something. It's not asking for perfection, it's not demanding that you get better, it's only asking for one thing: to be seen, not fixed, not rushed, just seen. Because what if all this time you were never broken, just hurt? And what if that's okay? You walk through your days carrying bags of memories you never meant to pack, still hearing echoes of things they said. Don't be so sensitive, you're too much. Why are you always like this? So you folded yourself smaller, spoke softer, laughed only when others did, and you called it surviving because you didn't know it could be anything else. But there were moments, tiny, almost invisible, where someone saw through the cracks: a teacher who paused, a friend who stayed longer than necessary, a stranger who smiled without expecting anything back. And those moments, they mattered more than you realized, because they whispered the truth you couldn't say aloud: that you are not broken, just hurt, and hurt can heal. Healing doesn't look like movies, it doesn't play background music when you cry, it doesn't come with grand realizations in the rain. Healing is brushing your teeth even when you don't feel worth the effort. It's making your bed so your body knows it's safe to rest. It's drinking water when your thoughts say you don't deserve comfort. It's slow, quiet, and impossibly brave, because healing is choosing to live even when part of you still clings to the idea of disappearing, not because you want to die, but because you're tired of not feeling seen. And if that's you, then hear this: you are not invisible, not here, not now, not anymore. Walls you built to survive, they did their job, they kept you standing, but they're not who you were. are the softness they tried to dim the hope that never fully burned out the child who once dreamed of being held without question, and you still deserve that the world may not always offer it. But your heart can, your breath can, this moment can. So pause right here, let the silence hold you like a blanket. Let the story reach the places no one else has ever touched. You don't need to prove anything, not to me, not to them, not even to yourself. You are not broken. Just hurt, and hurt can heal, especially when it's finally allowed to be heard. There were things you never told anyone, not because you didn't want to, but because you didn't have the language yet. Because pain has a way of making you forget how to ask for help. You held your breath for years, waiting for someone to notice. The quiet in your voice, the tremble in your laughter, the pause before you said, "I'm fine," but no one asked the right questions. So you stopped hoping they would. Instead, you got good at hiding. You became the person who smiles at the right time, laughs at the right volume, gives advice like your world isn't falling apart. In silence, you gave your love to everyone else and left none for yourself, because somewhere deep down you believed you weren't worth it. Too thought love had to be earned, that comfort had to be deserved, that healing was a gift only given to people who didn't mess everything up. But that was never truth. Truth is, you were hurting and still showing up. You were breaking and still offering kindness. You were exhausted, but never bitter, lonely, but never cruel. You carried your wounds quietly, wrapped in layers of understanding, excuses, and gentle lies. "I'm just tired. I just need time. I'm used to it." And the world accepted those answers because it's easier than listening, easier than holding space, easier than staying. So you stayed for yourself. You whispered, "Keep going," when no one else did. And maybe that wasn't loud, but it was powerful, because it meant you hadn't given up, not completely, even when you thought you had. Some part of you still hoped, still waited, still reached toward something better. You learned how to survive alone. But survival is not the same as living. You want more now, don't you? Not just quiet days, but peaceful ones. Not just nights without crying, but mornings with light. You want to breathe without bracing, to speak without shrinking, to love without apologizing. And that wanting, that longing, is the beginning of your return. You are finding your way back, not to the person you used to be, but to the one who was never allowed to exist fully. The one who laughed without guilt, who cried without shame, who needed things and didn't apologize for it. That version of you still lives here, still whispers under every heartbeat, still remembers what safety feels like, even if it's been a long time. And yes, it's okay to be afraid, because healing requires surrender, letting go of identities built in defense, dropping shields you've carried for years. But you don't have to do it all at once. You can soften, slowly breathe deeper, in small moments. Trust yourself, 1 inch at a time. This isn't a race. It's a return, and every time you choose rest over punishment, stillness over panic, hope over numbness, you're coming home. The world may never fully understand what you went through, but your body does, your breath does, your soul does. And now it's time to begin again. Not from scratch, but from truth, because you were never broken, just hurt. And every scar you carry is proof that you kept walking, even when it felt like crawling, even when no one saw you, even when you didn't think you mattered. You did. You are not invisible here. You are not forgotten in this story. You are the story, and it's only just beginning. There was a time when silence felt safer than truth, when disappearing felt easier than being misunderstood. You didn't mean to vanish. You just stopped showing up where you weren't seen. You became a ghost in your own life, walking through moments like a shadow, nodding when you didn't agree, smiling when you didn't mean it, shrinking even when you were trying to grow. You got used to the background, the soft edges where no one asked too much, where you could be present without being known. But that silence, that stillness, it wasn't peace, was survival. It was what you did to stay afloat, to make it through another day without collapsing. You found little corners to hide your pain, a playlist, a notebook, A quiet walk at dusk, those were your safe places, not because they fixed anything, but because they didn't ask you to pretend you could just be, even if being hurt, even if being tired. There was a comfort in not needing to explain, in having a space where your sadness didn't need translation, where your heart could rest even for a moment. You were gentle with yourself in ways no one noticed, letting yourself cry, letting yourself pause, letting yourself hope, even when hope felt foolish. You whispered dreams into the cracks of your day. Maybe one day, maybe someday, maybe me too. You didn't believe them fully, but you didn't stop saying them either, because some small part of you still believed in morning, still believed in softness, still believed in love, even after all the heartbreak, even after all the silence, even after all the times you were left waiting. You never stopped wanting, and that mattered. It meant you hadn't hardened. You hadn't become what hurt you. You were still tender, still reaching. That is strength, not loud, not flashing, but steady, unmoving like roots in the dark. You are not who they said you were, not the failure, not the burden, not the too much or the not enough. You were never broken, just forced to hold more than anyone ever should, and you did it alone, quietly, bravely. That's what no one tells you. That quiet bravery counts to the bravery of waking up, of trying again, of loving again, of choosing softness in a world that taught you to fight. You kept your heart open, even when the world gave you every reason to close it, and that is everything. Now you're learning to come forward again, to stand in the center instead of the corner, to speak even when your voice shakes, to stay even when you want to run. You are not who you were in your worst moment. You are who you became after who you're becoming now, gentler, wiser, stronger, still soft. You are the person who picked up the pieces, who walked back into the light, not because it was easy, but because you knew you deserved more. And maybe you're still learning how to believe that, how to wear worthiness like skin instead of armor, but you're getting there, and that's enough. No more shrinking. No more apologizing for taking up space. No more pretending to be fine when you're a salon. Not you're allowed to feel it all. The grief, the rage, the relief, the joy, the hope, the fear. You're allowed to be whole, not perfect whole. That includes the cracks, the soft spots, the shadows, the scares. Here, not waiting to become someone better. You are already the person who made it, and that's not just enough, that's everything. There is a version of you who stayed when everything told you to run, a version who kept smiling when the weight felt too much, who opened your heart even after it had been broken. That part of you deserves to be seen, the one who showed up, who tried, who cared too much, who loved even when it was not returned. You didn't fail. You gave, and giving is never failure. There's a difference between being hurt and being unworthy. You were never the problem, even when they blamed you, even when they walked away, even when you felt like a burden. You weren't. You were brave enough to feel, to care, to risk being known. And yes, it hurt, but you survived that too. Sometimes healing feels like betrayal, like letting go of identities you clung to just to make sense of the chaos. You weren't weak. You were exhausted. There's a difference. You weren't broken. You were overwhelmed by the pressure, the silence, weight of expectations you never agreed to. You did what you could with what you knew, with what you had, with a heart that refused to harden. That is resilience, that is grace. But now you're allowed to rest, to exhale, to stop proving your worth through pain. You don't have to earn softness. You were born deserving of it. Let yourself be held by the quiet, by mornings without ache, by nights without pretending. Let yourself need things. Let yourself receive. That's the hardest part sometimes. Not the surviving, but the soft and endure. Learning how to trust joy again, how to let good things stay, how to stop expecting everything to hurt because it did for so long. You flinched even when nothing was coming. You waited for the ending even in the beginning, but you don't have to do that anymore. This life, this breath, this chapter is different. You are different, not because time changed you, but because you chose to rise again and again and again, when it didn't feel brave. Even when it felt like failure, you kept showing up hand that changed everything. This isn't the end of your pain, but it is the end of hiding, of shrinking, of blaming yourself for the things others couldn't hold you. Can stop running now. You're not in danger anymore. You can stay, you can rest, you can receive the love that's trying to reach you, not because you're perfect, but because you're Rilu. Are allowed to be messy, to be unsure, to be healing and still hurting you. Don't have to have all the answers. You just need the courage to keep listening to yourself, to your needs too. The quiet longing for more, that longing isn't weakness. It's your soul remembering what it means to feel whole, not fixed. Whole, including the ache, including the longing, including the parts of you that still don't know how to trust. You don't need to rush it. You don't need to force it. Just stay with yourself, with this moment, with the truth you're allowed to love yourself. Even here, even now, even before you think you've earned it, because what if you were never broken, just hurt? And what if hurt people are still worthy of love, of safety, of being seen, of being held? You always weren't. That is the beginning of peace. You spent so much of your life waiting for someone to understand, waiting for someone to stay, waiting for a moment that felt safe. You weren't asking for perfection, just for presence, just for someone who would see past the mask and hold what was real. But sometimes that someone doesn't come when you need them most. Sometimes they come later. Sometimes they turn out to be you. Became the person who listened, who stayed, who didn't turn away from the parts of you that felt too heavy. You held space even when it was hard, even when you didn't have the words. You stayed anyway. Now you are becoming the one you needed. The one who speaks softly when the fear rises, the one who chooses compassion instead of shame, the one who understands that healing takes time. You are learning to be gentle with the version of you that didn't know, that couldn't know, that tried anyway. You're not mad at them anymore. You don't blame them anymore. You finally understand why they did what they did, because they were surviving, because they were scared, because they didn't yet believe there was another way. But you do know him. That changes everything. You know now that grief isn't weakness, that rest isn't laziness, that tears aren't failure, that softness isn't a flaw. You're unlearning the lies you were taught, the ones that told you you had to be hard to be safe, that you had to be silent to be loved, that you had to earn your worth. No more. You were always worthy. Even in the mess, even in the chaos, even when no one told, especially then. You are beginning again, not from scratch, but from wisdom. From scars that turned into lessons, from pain that turned into power. You are walking differently now, softer, steadier, with a quiet kind of knowing. You don't need to rush, you don't need to chase, you just need to stay close to yourself, to listen, to honor, to protect the light you fought so hard to keep. This is what healing looks like. Not a straight line, but a spiral, returning to the same places, but with deeper understanding. Each time you still have hard days, you still fall into old thoughts, you still feel the sting of old wounds, but you don't stay there as long. You don't believe the story the pain tries to tell you. You know now, you're not broken, you were just hurt, and hurt can heal. Our proof of that: your breath is softer, your steps are lighter, your voice is clearer, and when the world feels heavy again, you know where to go back to. Your center, back to your truth. You don't abandon yourself anymore. You are not waiting to be saved. You are not hoping someone else will complete you. You are already whole, not because everything is perfect, but because you stopped trying to be. You are not the pain that happened to you. You are the person who carried it and who decided it would not be the end of the story. You are still writing, still becoming, still choosing, and every time you choose softness over shame, presence over avoidance, kindness over critique, you grow, not taller, not louder, but deeper, more rooted. You are grounded now in truth, in compassion, in yourself. And maybe some people won't understand, maybe some will leave, but the ones who stay will meet you here in this quiet, honest, luminous space. You are love, not just capable of it, but made of it. And that love, when turned inward, is the most powerful thing in the world. You have not failed. You have returned to yourself, to your life, to your heart, and that is everything.